YouTube and welcome to another video. Today we will be taking a look at these Winx comic book collections and magazines, and we're gonna be talking about Winx Club comic book collections and magazines and my thoughts and feelings about the collections in general, and whether or not you'd be better off trying to buy the magazines or the comic collections, and just like how they compare and what I think are the pros and cons of them and how they are different, because I have two different comic collections here. So I did a poll on this like ages ago, but because I had some other comic book collections I wanted to get, I waited until I had all of them and until I had read all of them. So here I have the brand new comic collections. These have been released very recently. The copyright says 2024 on number 3, and on number 5 it says 2025. So these are from last year, these are relatively new. And then I have one Finnish comic book collection. Funnily enough, like the moment I was thinking about making this video, the covers of this one came off. So now this one has loose covers. I'm going to compare them and talk about them. And I also have one Italian comic here. I have an entire video that I made ages ago, but I don't think I need to like remake it or anything. I have an entire video where I compare different countries' Winx comics because they are very different. I'll put it in the little info corner. I haven't like checked it out recently, but I think it's still like fine to watch because I haven't gotten that many new comics. I have gotten some new comics, so they are very different, and I guess I could have also gotten more comics to compare, but then this would almost be a comic book comparing video, and this video is about the comic book collections. So I'm gonna be talking about the plot a little bit as well. There may be some spoilers in this video. So let's start with the comic collection from the 2008. This comic collection includes comics 1 to 3 and is in Finnish. And I actually for the longest time thought that they only did this one, but I did some research before filming this video just to be sure, and apparently they published 4 of these. And this checks out because on the back of this comic there is an advertisement for the next comic coming of. And this was at a time where Winx Club comics were still being published. On the very back of this comic book collection, there is also an ad to order the Winx comic to your home. I never did because I'm not even sure if you could order it to Estonia. There is a text here that you could send, and you could get the Winx comics to your home. A little bit about my background as a Winx Club comic reader. Winx Club comics were never sold in Estonia, and I live permanently in Estonia, and we never had Winx comics, we just had Witch comics. And so I got all of my Winx comics from abroad, and my main source of Winx comics was Finland, because Finland is right next to us, but also because I understand Finnish rather well, so I have a lot of Winx comics in Finnish. This one is in Italian, so of course I would also, if anyone was going to Italy or France or any of the other countries, like my go-to souvenir if someone is traveling anywhere in Europe where I know that Winx stuff is still being published and someone is like, do you want something? I will always to this day say that, hey, can you get me a Winx magazine? If you see a Winx magazine, get it to me, I'll pay for it. And I have gotten newer Winx magazines like this as well. And this was how I operated as a child as well. Obviously, when I would go to Finland, I would mostly get Winx magazines. I didn't get the entail of the Winx magazines anymore as they were coming out because they were becoming way too expensive. So I found this wonderful blog, Winxologia, and this is a Finnish blog. They have a lot of cool information about Winx Club. So this is a really good Winx blog. I'll link the Winx blog down below. And in this blog they have this section called Winxklubilehdet, which is talking about the Winx Club magazines. And here they have very clearly categorized the Winx comics as they were coming out. And here they also have the Taikabokkarit, the comic book collections that were released in Finnish. Unfortunately, the images are super small, so I can't actually read much of what the stuff is saying. This says new, but this one I have. But yeah, I can only like make out the main like number 4 and which of the comics these are including. And from what I checked, I couldn't find better images of these as well, but they do at least exist. And then they have Winx Club comics by years. 2006 is when they started coming out, and then 2013. And I actually have all of the all of these three last ones. And I was in that video speculating where I covered these, that these might be the last Winx comics ever made, or some of the last. And I think this actually says that it's the last one. So yeah, these are the last Winx comics. I actually have all of the 2013 ones. And yeah, I got these three last ones from Tampere Publier last year. So for me personally, getting Winx Club magazines as they were coming out was complex because they weren't available in my country. And often I would get them in languages that I didn't speak. So even though I have a large collection of Winx Club magazines, a lot of those I have never read. Like, I have them, and Google Translate did exist, and I think I did try Google translating some of them at the time. But even now, if you try to Google Translate with the lens comics, it's kind of an iffy territory, because comics are like lettered differently, and it's not like a regular book where the text just goes straight. Actually, like, Google translating comics is still pretty hard. It still doesn't do a great job. Basically, every time I have tried Google translating comics, it hasn't been like a smooth reading experience. It's not going to be a smooth reading experience either way. And there have been times where Winx Club comics have been available online. There was a Rainbow app as well where you could read comics, which I'm also covering in one of my videos. I'll put that somewhere as well. And they have just been available as either fan translations or the Singaporean versions. I think mostly the Singaporean versions online as well. So I have read some of those as well, but I have always wanted to own them and read them as I own them in a language that I understand. So for me, for that reason, these Winx Club comics have been incredibly valuable, especially this entire stack. I'd like to thank my friend who works in a bookstore who special ordered these for me, because I got volume 3 from their website at first, and they said on the website that everything else was out of stock, and then after a while they took the listings down. So I went and spoke to my friend and was like, hey, you used to have some Winx comics but not anymore, and I had this gift card. And she was like, hey, I can try and order these for you from the publisher, and she did, and I got a great deal on them. If they are releasing any more of these, I would love to have more of these. I really enjoy reading them in terms of just having the story as one narrative. Like, I don't have to wait a whole month to get another issue like I used to, but also because the issues weren't released where I live, I'm not missing a bunch of issues. I can read them back to back as they are meant to be read. The Winx Club comic book universe has its own Winx Club AU. Like, the comic book AU is its own universe, and the stories are like one big continuous plot. Even though each of the stories is usually kind of self-contained as well, there are a few instances in which there's like a to be continued in the next comic, but oftentimes the stories are self-contained, but they still carry on elements and plot lines and things from the previous comics. So in that regard, it is really good. I'm gonna be talking about the plot of these comics a little bit and what I enjoy about the plot of these comics. Just a side note, I really loved it the first time Bloom meets Sky in the comics. She accidentally attacks the boys. I just think it makes a lot of sense. So in regards of plot, the Winx Club comics are a little bit more edgy, and I think they're for a little bit of an older demographic. They're not afraid to go really dark, and to be fair, like, old Winx Club wasn't really afraid to go dark either, but I feel like the comics do that a lot more. And by the way, I didn't buy the first edition of this series. I already had this version, so I was like, I don't want doubles. of the same thing essentially. In my opinion, the Winx Club comics really shine once they start to diverge from the animated series universe more, because in the beginning the story is different but still kind of the same, and I do still really enjoy that it takes some of the storylines from the original series and shows them from like a different perspective, or a different angle, and you see some of the things you didn't see in the series but that could still be explored. I think the comic book storyline is really strong, and I think if you were expecting good things from the Winx Club reboot, you should try and read the Winx Club comics, because I think the Winx Club comics does what the Winx Club reboot had a great opportunity to do but didn't, which is to take a look at the plot holes and everything, because the Winx Club comics have this hindsight basically. They know what is happening in the stories. The original Winx Club seasons are kind of winging it. They are making up stuff as they go along, especially later, because the series wasn't supposed to go on for that long. But earlier on as well, there were things that were changed during the writing process of that show, and because of that, there are like weird plot holes and unexplored themes, and the comics really cover that, and they cover like some of the plot holes, but even not just plot holes, they cover like some of the things that the series doesn't cover. It shows you like some sides of the story that the series doesn't. And even though it is its own AU basically from the start, from the very start, there are like major similarities, but then it diverges quite quickly. But still, even as you know that this is an AU and not necessarily the same thing as the series, because even some of the characterizations are a little bit different, you can still read them and think, oh, but this was probably what happened in the background of the series. One of my absolute favorite examples of this, and something that I absolutely love about this, is here in the end of season 1 basically, where Aisha actually catches a glimpse of Bloom for the first time as she's going to the Rockalucci Lake to find Daphne and to get her powers back, and she sort of stumbles across Pixie habitation, Pixie Village, by accident, and they sort of use magic to drive her out without her noticing them. But we do see Layla for the very first time in this season 1 plotline, which is very cool. One of the things I always disliked about the series is that a lot of the characters seem to kind of pop out of nowhere, and I think that was because they were making up stuff as they went along, but it always felt like, oh, this stuff didn't exist before, but now for this season it exists, and oftentimes it would later stop existing as well, which was even more annoying. Like, okay, we didn't know that these pixie pets existed, for instance, but why are they now suddenly gone? We never acknowledged them again. So in that regard, I really appreciate the comics, because it establishes the Pixies during the season 1 and sort of pulls the series together and creates this one coherent story, which I think the animated series is really lacking. And I really love that about the comics, that the comic series feels a little bit more coherent to me than it does as an animated series. Now, this isn't as much of a plot thing as it is, I guess it's an art style thing more than that, but I also really love how the Winx girls have different outfits in these comics constantly, and they're the kind of outfits that are like a different take on their normal clothes. Like, they are very similar to their normal clothes, but they're also obviously different. There are obvious differences. It does sort of create this interesting question of, do they mostly wear like clothes that are very similar in style all the time? Because Flora does seem to like mostly have green tops and pink skirts. They're just different, which is interesting because people don't necessarily usually like do that. Like, not all of their tops are the same color scheme but different cuts. But I still think it's cool that they have these different clothings, and like Tekna has a very similar blouse but with different sleeves. And also in some places of the comic they would use clothing from official artworks, but that was just used in like promo pics and wasn't used in the series proper, so it was never animated, but there was just like official art of it. Like they used one of Musa's blue dresses, which I did really like. It's super short, but I like the idea that they used it. Then sometimes they will reuse underappreciated outfits from the show. There is a party where Bloom goes, and for that party, Stella wears the outfit she wears in season 1, episode 1, which is one of my favorite outfits of Stella's of all time. I think that's so underappreciated. I even like the redo of that outfit that Nickelodeon did for their 1 hour special. Like I just love that Stella has that outfit. It's super cool. And yeah, one of the like small things I like about this is that they have these outfits that are very them, that are very similar to their usual outfits, but are different, and they clearly have different clothes. One of the other things I like is that sometimes they will use official artwork within the comic book as well, and like have within comic DVDs. Like in one of the episodes, they literally have DVDs of the Winx girls because they made DVDs of their like memories in the Palladium's chamber. And yeah, they have just burned DVDs of their own like memories and things, which is something like people did at the time a lot as well. Like I have a lot of DVDs from my childhood with like photos of things we did. We would burn like photos on DVDs quite often. But then the cover of the DVD is like official Winx art that they would use for DVDs, and I think that's super super cool. Talking about the artwork, I will say that the artwork is super all over the place. There are beautiful, beautiful panels that are super detailed, and like especially when there was like lighting and shading, that's super well done and super detailed. I absolutely love that, and there are these super detailed, beautiful artworks. And then there are also panels that just look terrible and really really rushed. And Winx Club Newsflash does these compilations of animation mistakes for Winx Club, and I feel like Winx Club Newsflash would have a field day with the comics. There are so many little mistakes, things being miscolored, things being filled in that are not supposed to be filled in, just details missing from their outfit. And that really surprises me because in animation I sort of get it. You have so many frames that you're likely to miss a glove here or there. Even in entire scenes, like I get how that happens. But in comics, you have more time to look at each frame. So it's really interesting. Like I'm looking at this volume 4, and here Stella has purple eyeshadow for one of the whole pages, and I think it's actually slay. I love it. I love when Stella has this eyeshadow because I also love this color of eyeshadow, and she does in some of the official artwork as well and such. But she has this eyeshadow for one page, and then for the rest of it she doesn't wear that eyeshadow, which is so random and weird. Like, oh, she's later randomly wearing it in her transformation outfit as well, but you can also see that her hair is loose here. Like there are loads of these little mistakes in the designs, and the consistency is just terrible, which I'm assuming is because they don't have a lot of time. They didn't have a lot of time to make these comics, but I'm really surprised that it's so prevalent. There are also differences in the line art. Sometimes the line art is wholly black, which is like very classical for these kinds of comics, and sometimes they do this sort of softer line art, and I actually love when they do this. They do this like colorful line art, and I think it looks so much better and so much fun, but they do it randomly. There are panels where the lighting is just superb and where the panel looks like a work of art, and then there are panels where the characters' faces just look so off, where they haven't even drawn pupils into the characters' eyes. It really bothered me when it looks like creepy, but I'm pretty sure they're not laziness because I have worked in the publishing and in the artist and in like artsy industries so much that I'm sure that they're just time constraints and stress, and there just wasn't enough time to fix these mistakes. But basically, after the events of the end of season 1, Winx Club Comics completely diverged from canon of the animated series, and I think there are later still some places where they sort of come together again and use similar storylines, but most of the time Winx Club Comics diverge heavily later on from the animated series, and I personally really enjoy it, and I really recommend reading the comics, and I especially really recommend the older comics. The first five volumes only have a glimpse of Aisha, so the fifth volume kind of takes place in this timeline between season 1 and season 2, you could say. So we haven't met Aisha yet officially, even though she was in one of the older comics. But yeah, I really enjoy it. And like pixies also are shown to exist before Bloom sees them, which is really fun. One thing I did notice that to me was a plot hole, but someone can correct me if I'm wrong. There was this comic where they see Myrta where they see Myrta working at a beauty salon, and they talk about her and they talk to her about her desires of becoming a fairy, but I feel like they don't meet Myrta anywhere else earlier in the comics. I didn't reread the very first comics I have in Finnish, but I feel like they didn't. I like flipped through them, and I feel like they didn't meet Myrta anywhere else before, but they clearly knew her. So some of the canon events of the series happened kind of off screen, it seems. On that note, can you read the comics without watching the series? I think you actually usually can. The comics are, interestingly enough, start from the episode 2 of Winx Club and then later take a flashback to how Bloom and Stella met. Bloom and Stella meeting is originally in the comic volume, so this isn't a collection but like a singular volume 4. So yeah, you have three stories before you actually find out how Bloom and Stella met, and I think that's an interesting diversion as well. I think it makes it more interesting because having these beginning comics be very similar to the beginning of the animated series might put some people off. So I actually like that they diverge pretty early on. So I'm now going to be comparing these books. So let's talk about format. To me, this is the biggest fall or the biggest problem of the Finnish Taikabokkarit. So the English collection is almost as wide as the comic, but not as tall. And this Finnish version is really tiny, and it makes reading hard, not only because the images are smaller and so the text is smaller, but also because the book is so small. It's really hard to you can't bend it out all the way. If you do, because there's this glue binding, it will just break again. Like the covers have already come off. So this, in terms of reading comfortability, I would rate this one lower. It's fine, it's still readable, but it's like a 6 or a 7. I think the comic book size is what you're meant to read it as, and you can see all the art. Yeah, I would say these are much better to read. Obviously these are new, so I'm not yet worried about it falling apart. So really I should do another review in like 10 years. But the size difference really makes it easier to read, and it's much closer to the original size of the comics, which makes it easy to read. I prefer it in that regard. Now there are other interesting things to note. I feel like these are more geared towards older demographic and like the nostalgic demographic that is nostalgic for Winx Club. And you can also see this in the designs of all of these newer collections. They use images of season 1. It also makes sense because the comics take place within season 1 timeline and between season 1 and season 2. I am curious as to if they keep making them, if they're gonna add Aisha to the cover. They should. It would only make sense. And like going forward, would they add Enchantix or would they still try to use older artworks? But basically throughout this entire comic you can see that the marketing, and for the marketing they use old images of the Winx girls. They use these very classic images that you have seen 1,000 times before if you're a Winx fan of the Winx girls. For some of them, I think they use reimagined, like redrawn images of the classical ones, because I feel like this image of Musa had a different top originally, and I feel like there's a variant where she has a different top. I'll try looking for that as I'm editing. I love this image, by the way. This is my favorite image. I also like they have different clothing here. Like Stella has shorts instead of her skirts. Tekna has a top we never see. Musa has a different top. So this is very fitting for the comics as well, because in comics they do wear different types of clothing as well. And Bloom has an outfit we never see in the animated series. So I really like the choice of the cover here. But inside, all of these, like, table of content is done with season 1 art. They just rely on season 1 art in everything that isn't the comic as well. All of the, like, in between pages and the designs are made using season 1 art. But when we look at this, which was released during the season 3 era, I think this is a really interesting shift that Winx Club has had in marketing recently, because back in the day they would always use the artwork of the newest seasons. This is volumes 1 to 3. But they are using artwork for season 3 because season 3 was coming out at the time, and inside they are using artwork of season 2 and season 3, and in these little in-between pages they are also using artworks of season 2. So at the time they felt the need to use the newest art that they had, not necessarily the art that matched the contents of the comics. I do like it when there's a sort of uniformity, that they do use the artwork that matches the comic timeline, but I still find that really interesting. Other interesting things to note is that these comics have this sort of commentary from the Winx girls. Like here, in the next story, the fairies will meet the boys of the Red Fountain for the first time. Gives you like a sort of sneak peek into the next story, which I don't think is necessary because the next story is right here. But it's interesting that they did that. Both of these comic collections have introductory pages for all the fairies. In the Finnish version it's in the back, in the English version it's in the front. The introduction is much more simple and fact-based. Here in the Finnish version it's just their age, it's the source of their powers, and it's their characterization. And here we find out that Stella is 1 year older than everyone else, if anyone needs like a factual source for that fact. I have like sometimes been trying to find it and I haven't found it, but I know that it's true, and this is one of the places where it says so. And now one of the things that really actually makes me prefer this Finnish collection is that in these new collected editions they will basically credit everyone but the artist. There's the editor, there's the English language localizer, there's the production, there's the letterer, there's the editor-in-chief, publisher, executive vice president of sales, director of marketing, production manager, and design director. But where is the artist? If you want to find the artist of these comics, you don't see them anywhere. And that really bothers me, and I was really annoyed by that. I also noticed while filming B-roll that some of the newer collections of the comics list even less people, but none of them seem to list the artists. And I also checked the Singular magazine. That one is in Italian, obviously, the one I'm using as an example, but they do seem to list the artists there, the colorers and the people who actually have something to do with the art process of making the comic. And also, here in the Finnish version, I told you that I'm preferring the Finnish version for this. Here, once each of the comics starts, you can see here they have the artists, the coloring. So they have listed the artists here. And if we go to the next story, here in the Secrets of Althea, you can once again say the series is created by Genius 3, the scripting, the drawings, the lettering, I assume, the coloring. So yeah, here you can tell who was who drew these comics, and this is very, very important. Even if I had worked on these comics 20 years ago now, because the first ones came out in 2006, I would still want to be credited for them if they're getting re-released 20 years later. And I think especially if my assumptions about them wanting to release them for an older target audience is correct, it's especially weird that they haven't credited the artists anywhere in these new collections. And this is the biggest issue I have with these new collections, because I am also very interested who drew these artworks, if these are done by different people every time. This is a really interesting thing to consider and to read about, and I'm just disappointed that they didn't cover these things in the book itself. These are my thoughts regarding it. As I've said before, I definitely recommend, if you can get these. Winx Club comics are great. If you love Winx Club, the TV series, check out the comics as well. And especially if you find the new series to be a little bit too childish in comparison to the older seasons, then I think the comics are definitely something fun. If they keep releasing them and I can get my hands on them, I would love to read it, because as I said before, I think it's really great to have the entirety of the story just continue and not have gaps the way I have had my whole life, and I can just enjoy the entirety of the story at once. Make sure to subscribe and leave this video a like. If I didn't cover anything that you're interested in, or if you'd like me to cover some other aspect of these comics, let me know in the comments below. There are other great Winx YouTubers who cover the comics as well, but I'm always happy to cover Winx stuff. So if you have ideas and things you'd like to see me cover, please leave them in the comments below and I'll check them out. Check out some of my other Winx videos, I have loads of them, and I'll see you in another video.